Hi, good morning, everyone. Ed Bixby here from the Global Green Burial Alliance, and this is Spotlight Now. Today, I am speaking with Patrick Crawford and Arlette O'Rourke. Uh, Patrick and Arlette are co-founders of Sacred Grove, Charleston's first green burial sanctuary. A certified green cemetery operator and end-of-life doula, Arlette brings a multidisciplinary background in psychology, hospice care, and ecological restoration to her work. Her vision for Sacred Grove grew out of a deep commitment to both spiritual integrity and environmental responsibility, creating a model where death care actively contributes to land conservation, biodiversity, and community healing. So welcome, Arlette, and welcome, Patrick.
It's great to meet you.
Thank you, Ed. We're happy to be here.
No, we're glad to have you. Beautiful part of the country that you live in, and I can only imagine how gorgeous the grounds are. So why don't we get into this a little bit more and learn a little bit about your background and what piqued your interest in green burials and providing these services? Because there's two of you, why don't we start with you, Arlette, and then Patrick, you can share your words as well.
So I purchased this property. It was during COVID, and basically COVID was difficult for my existing businesses, and so we own a catering company, and at the time I owned another wedding venue, and so I decided to retreat to the countryside, and so we're about an hour outside of Charleston. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do with this property. And so we thought that we were going to create a regenerative farm for the catering company, which we are doing. But through that process, I had a health scare and I learned about green burial, but I didn't put a lot of thought into it. I was like, well, that was the first time I had ever heard of green burial. And I was like, oh, that's such an excellent option. And it seemed so natural that that would be what I would want at end of life. And so during that period, I was doing a lot of research about planting trees and dealing with this carbon problem that we have and, climate change and how we were going to address that as a society. And in that research, I realized that they were planting a lot of trees, but the trees were dying because of our loss of topsoil. And so I had a terrible thing happen, which was my dog ate a bag of bread off the shelf and got his head stuck in the bag and he died. And so I buried the dog and this giant green patch of grass grew around the dog. And so this property was a golf course for 40 years. And so the soil is in terrible condition because they've been applying fertilizers to the grass for so long that the soil is very acidic. And so we were spending a lot of time researching how to regenerate the soil. And when that green patch grew around the dog, I was like, it has to be part of the system. We have to bury our animals and ourselves to help regenerate this soil problem that we have. That's such a huge issue in the United States and pretty much, globally. So that was
absolutely.
That was really the key thing that happened. And so I started reaching out to Ramsey Creek is in South Carolina. And so they're the first green burial cemetery in the United States. And so we reached out to Billy and Kimberly and visited Ramsey Creek, and that got the whole process started. And so it's been 4 years now. It took us 4 years to open, and a lot of work and research to figure out how to make this thing happen. And we ended up going with a nonprofit to build this place. And so we have the nonprofit, we allocated 21 acres of the 56 acres total to green burial. And then the adjoining property, the other 35 acres, is being built into a regenerative farm and also a spiritual wellness center. So people will be able to
That
Sorry.
sounds beautiful. That sounds beautiful. No, I mean, so it's an interesting concept in the sense that, you know, you're working in reverse in many ways. You're taking a property that and you're remediating it, it sounds to me. You know, bringing it back to nature where opposed to where it was being used in a recreational. You said it was a golf course, correct?
Yes, and so my previous wedding venue was also a golf course. And so what we found is that these properties need remediation. And I don't think it stops here. I think there's a lot of brownfield properties out there that need remediation through changes in the soil, whether it's mycology, which I think is going to be a huge component in the future, but green burial is so simple and so easy to implement that it needs to be done on a larger scale. And golf has really fallen out of favor with the younger generation. And also the younger generation really understands the dire consequences of what we've been doing to the environment for the last 100 years. And so I think, well, I know that a lot of golf courses are going out of business, and these properties, they already have an infrastructure built where there's good drainage, they're picturesque. It's a good place to build like a community center and also to regenerate it at the same time.
Well, no, it sounds to me like you're onto something. I mean, you know, this is turning into a much this conversation is much more in the sense that typically people are looking for that pristine piece of property to develop. And, you know, we've specialized in historic cemeteries, but we have also explored, you know, like you said, brownfield sites, areas that could use remediation because lots of times they're available for a variety of reasons, as you guys probably well know. A lot of times the communities that have them don't want to remediate them themselves. So they're looking for people like yourselves, you know, to assume ownership and to take on that task. So that really sounds not only interesting, but exciting for people that are listening to this today, because I think it broadens their horizons. So I think that that's really a key component. And, you know, with that being said, so what would your green burial process and funeral experience look like? I mean, I know you do the tree burials. Could you tell the viewers a little more about that so they could visualize what what you're going to be doing and doing?
Yeah, so basically I went to the Green Burial Council and got a green cemetery operator certification. And so we learned all of the ins and outs of green burial that way. And in the state of South Carolina, some of the laws are prohibitive of, there's a lot of different requirements. One is that the property needs to be fee simple. And so that means that you have to own the property outright. And so that was our first big hurdle, was to purchase this property, which is owned by one of my companies, or was owned by one of my companies, and had a large loan against it through the SBA. And so we had to clear that loan, which meant I sold my other wedding venue property so that we could pay this property off and then donate the 21 acres to the nonprofit, which is Sacred Grove. And so being a nonprofit allowed us there were different state requirements, because in South Carolina, the majority of cemeteries are perpetual care cemeteries. And so the state board, the South Carolina Licensing Board, is who deals with the licensing and restrictions of perpetual care cemeteries. And they also allow for land conservation cemeteries, but you have to donate the land to a land trust. And we found it really difficult to find a land trust that was interested in joining us in this mission because they were afraid of the liability, and basically this was uncharted territory. And so we decided to go with the nonprofit route. And technically we are a interfaith church. And so the laws for a church or a nonprofit allowed us to more directly control how we operate as a green burial cemetery. And so that was that took us a while to come to terms with, because I've always operated for-profit businesses and nonprofit wasn't really in my wheelhouse at the time. And so we hired some consulting firms to help us through the nonprofit process. And we got all of that clearance last year. And so we were able to open, what was that, April 16th?
April 16th, which was actually, we didn't think we'd open until, when we got all that stuff originally done, we were thinking it would be later in the year. But we got to open a couple months earlier.
Yeah, so we just opened officially 2 weeks ago, and we are the first in the Low Country. So there's like I said, there's Ramsey Creek in the upstate, and there's another
Dust to dust.
there's Dust to Dust in Columbia. But because of the water table in Charleston, you can't just create a cemetery anywhere you want. And so we are within the boundaries of the Francis Marion National Forest. We're not part of the forest, but the forest kind of surrounds us. And so most of Charleston is either below sea level or 10 feet above sea level. And so we are just far enough inland that we're about 79 feet above sea level. And we're able to accommodate burials without issue with flooding. And being within the boundaries of the Francis Marion National Forest, we also have a lot of recreation in the area. So it's nice for people to be able to come out here and they can walk on our walking trails. There are other trails nearby in the forest. The Palmetto Trail, which runs through the state of South Carolina, it's the longest trail in South Carolina, is 6 miles from us. And then we're also 6 miles from Lake Moultrie, which is another big recreation area for cyclists and runners and boaters. And so it's we don't want this to be just a cemetery where people come to grieve. We want people to come here even before they die and enjoy the property, enjoy the area, and see the life that this can bring back to a community, and also a piece of land that needs to be remediated.
Well, I must say, you've kind of taken a page out of my playbook in many ways, meaning that you design these places where people like to recreate while they're living. That's what's most important. Places that they become fond of during life. And it sounds like you have a beautiful place, an area where people like to visit, like to recreate, and I think that's going to be a key, to your success there. And congratulations on opening 2 weeks ago. I mean, that's wonderful news. And you've touched on a few things that I want to touch on with the viewers, and you probably didn't realize, but you've went through a lot of the trials and travails of what people will encounter when they're trying to do this. Like, for instance, a property must be owned free and clear. You can't, a cemetery space cannot be mortgaged. They're unmortgageable because you cannot foreclose on them. So those are things that you learn trial by fire. But it's good that people can hear that, in your story, so that they can understand what they will encounter in the future. So, it sounds like it's been a long journey for you guys, and you went through all the motions, and here you are, which is great, because sometimes people don't make it. It becomes overwhelming. So let me ask you this question. So while you were going through this, how has the community responded to your project? I mean, were they happy to see it? Did you have any opposition, or how did all that go for you?
We haven't had any opposition, thankfully. We have relationships built in the community Patrick is from St. Stephen, which is where we're located, which is extremely helpful, I have to say. He's what generation?
Too many,
Yeah,
but.
he's many generations here.
But I think probably the hardest thing was when you bought the property, it was just scheduled to be a wedding venue at the time, the farm. And there were issues with the county, the county wanted to fence the whole property and things like that. But then we found that it's a whole lot easier we're lucky to be able, there's another 100-acre property that attaches to us. And it annexed into the town of St. Stephen's. We were in the unincorporated portion of Berkeley County. And since it connected us, we were capable of annexing into the small town of St. Stephen's. And it's just a much easier community to be able to deal with.
And that's another thing people should realize is there's always a way. I mean, there is always a way. And I think that if your vision is true and you really believe in what you're doing, other people will help you find a way. And so it's not just Patrick's relationships through the businesses that I had already created. We knew the zoning and building codes people. We had a lot of projects that were already, you know, we had already been to many zoning meetings about other projects, and that definitely helped. Also, we're friends with our neighbors. We made friends with our neighbors. We have a supper club here every month. It's a business networking supper club. So we're friends not only with our neighbors, but the other businesses in town. And they can see that what we're doing is for the community, and that it's a genuine project. We're not just developers coming in trying to make a quick buck. This is, you know, a generational project. I have a 10-year-old son, and one day this will be his, and one day my grandchildren, hopefully, will be burying people here. And so we've been really fortunate that we live in a great community, and it's a worthwhile thing for everyone to be involved with.
No, you're 100% correct. And, you know, unlike a for-profit business, you know, a cemetery's forever. So your family will be, you know, generational. Your children, your grandchildren, and so on and so forth, you know, will, I'm sure, proudly represent and operate that particular property. So that's, you know, everything you've done. It sounds to me, again, for the viewer, what's wonderful is for them to be able to understand what they might encounter. So you've touched on quite a few things that I don't know that anyone's really talked about, you know, on the spotlights yet. You know, there are some opportunities out there that people aren't, you know, maybe don't quite understand. I think, you know, golf course lends itself certainly to a space like we're speaking about. You know, sure, there's some remediation, but nature heals quickly, as we know. So I think that once you put that plan into place, I'm sure it's going to be accelerated. So, I mean, at this point, I mean, the favorite part of what we do is I always like to ask, you know, where do you want to see this? Like, let's say in the next 5 to 10 years, what would your vision be for Sacred Grove? Where would you like it to be?
So I will start with my next plan of action, which is the regenerative farm side, which isn't technically Sacred Grove, but we feel like that auxiliary component is really important. And so we have 5 milk cows at the moment, and we are building a herd of Katahdin sheep. The sheep will be used to graze the cemetery to keep the weeds at bay, which is obviously like, it's like a tropical jungle here.
And the sheep are the only thing that will eat dog fennel.
Yes, dog fennel and briars are out of control in the summertime. And so we're really excited about being able to offer that. Like, and we've found that people are also, we've had a lot of inquiries and a lot of interest since we opened, even though it's only been 2 weeks. And they are thrilled that there are animals on the property. They can come here They can
Yeah.
they can have an event. You can have a living wake here because we have the event venue on the auxiliary property, and we have a catering company, so it can be catered. But also, they can bring children here. There are ponds that are stocked. They can catch and release fish. They can visit with the animals, and then the animals are also part of the remediation, because obviously the organic matter from the animals is, and not only that, but the way that animals graze, it creates a stronger root system for the grasses. And we have these beautiful meadow grasses here, and it keeps the briars and the dog fennel and things that take over down. But then the hooves of the animals actually aerate the soil and push that organic matter back into the soil. And so we're really excited about that aspect of it. And in the long term, what I would really like is to make this a model. And so that this would be the first model, and that we could replicate this on other golf courses would be ideal. But, there's plenty of properties out there. There's plenty of communities, that need a green cemetery, but also they need a community center where we're building regenerative systems for the people that live there. And so local food, local community, like I mentioned, the supper club, it brings a lot of people together. We're in a very rural area, and there's not a lot here. And so it's what I think is critical is that, and not to sound like corny and old, but we live in this digital age, and people are losing that aspect of community. And I think in the future, we're going to find that building these pockets of love and intention is going to help bring us forward through the times ahead, which we've got systems basically collapsing, right? And I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but we really are in a situation where it's going to take community, it's going to take intention and love, and it's going to take these new systems to rebuild what we've already destroyed over the last 100 years with our frivolous behavior. So,
Well, amen
Sorry.
to that. No, 100%. We've turned into a society that doesn't know how to socialize. Basically, we're technology has turned us into hermits, and we're not understanding what it is to be human in many ways. So I appreciate all the sentiments that you just said, because those are important. A lot of times you look back on the way you were raised, or how what your childhood looked like, and I feel as if it was a much simpler but happier time. So I totally agree, and I think that what you're doing is great. If any of our viewers are down in the Charleston area, I encourage them to visit you and look at what you're doing. I think you may not realize it, but it seems to me like you guys are visionaries. You're looking at something. He's pointing at you. So Arlette, but now Patrick, you got to be part of this too. So I think that's important to know. Like, you're doing something that's a cultural movement. It's making a big difference, and someday people will look back on that. So good job. We at the Global Green Burial Alliance support what you're doing. We appreciate you, Arlette and Patrick, for coming today and talking a little bit about your story. Viewers, you can learn more by visiting sacredgrovepreserve.com. And congratulations on your opening. And we please keep us advised as to happenings in the future. We'd love to be able to share this with our viewers. So thank you very much, Patrick and Arlette.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. It was a pleasure to be here, and we look forward to the future together.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, everyone. Until next time, this is Spotlight Now.